19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.
In Guyana and right across the Eastern Caribbean, it is 19 hours 30. You're listening to us on 99.1 FM in Demerara and Essequibo and 99.5 FM in Berbice. Online at culturenewsonline.com via our Facebook page, Culture Radio. You can also head across to our YouTube page, Culture Radio Live Stream. And of course, you can stream us there. It is the 28th day of August and it is Friday. And it is time for us to enter room 592 where we unleash the truth. And of course, at the helm of tonight's program is Dr. Yog Mahadeo and his co-host, senior journalist of Culture News, Leonard Gildarie. Gentlemen, a pleasant good evening to you and welcome.
Good evening to you, Mr. Joshua Van Slightman, and good evening to all of the technical team at Culture Radio that make this program a possibility. And good evening to my co-host, Mr. Leonard Gildarie, as well as our guest for this first segment of this Friday evening, Attorney at Law, Mr. Siand Dhurjon. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. How are you tonight, Leonard?
Pretty good. It's been a not so hot day. It's been a good day. I must say so. I'm not sure. I'm having some juice. What are you having?
Well, I will prefer to have some cappuccino here. Sian, how are you, my friend? The young attorney at law, energetic, and I'm sure ready to hit the ground running at the start of every day. And you look like the day is just about starting for you, Sian. How are you? Did we lose him?
No, he's still there. I think maybe you have your mic muted, sir.
Well, I can hear you. There you go, Sian. We can hear you now, I guess. How are you, sir?
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Well, just before we get started, let me say welcome across to everyone across the length and breadth of this beautiful country of ours, this lovely, lovely Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from, welcome to Room 592, where we unleash the truth. And this being a Friday evening, we have, as you may have noticed since last week, started a segment on Friday evening that is called The Law and You. And for the first 20 minutes of this segment, 20 to 25 minutes, we will be discussing matters pertaining to the law, how the law can affect you, the citizens of this country, and things that you might want to be acquainted with, things you might want to know about, and things that you yourself may be having questions about. And Leonard, I wish to use this opportunity to remind viewers and listeners that send us your questions. No question would be too tough for us here. We have a young man that is probably walking, not the law books that Anil recently donated, but law books on his own. He is walking law books on his own. And I am sure that any question you pose to us, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't have an immediate answer for you, you're going to help us to learn so that we can bring an answer to you at some stage or the other. So do continue to send us your question by WhatsApp or Facebook. You can contact Leonard and I, and we'll certainly know how to pass them on to our attorney at law. Leonard, my friend, if the police were to stop you, for whatever reason, you have mingled certain things at Kaito Radio, and the police were to stop you and to detain you, do you know your rights, sir? How long you can be detained, whether you can be released on bail or stuff like that? Do you know your rights, sir?
I think I could be able to be held in. They would hold me in custody for 72 hours, and if needs be, they could go and have an application to the courts for another period. And I'm not sure how long that period is going to be. And when you use the word mingo, you would have to explain a little later. But over to you, back.
I am sure. I purposely use that phrase, that word. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have asked attorney at law, Mr. Siand Dhurjon. As you know, he has been very energetic. He's a young man, his own law firm, and he is very, very keen on ensuring that the citizenry of this country is as knowledgeable as they could be with regards to the basics, knowing your rights, knowing what you can do in certain circumstances, knowing when it's time to contact a lawyer, for example, and how to go about getting your own rights, stood up for, with whether it's by the police or by other officers that may be representing the law. So tonight, Leonard, we have asked Mrs. Siand Dhurjon to talk to us and to share with viewers and listeners, with matters of detention, bail, questions that we may have in our minds that he can educate us on, that, if the police can keep us in custody, for how long, and then they would have to let us go. What rights do we have? Can we make a call? Can we call our family members? So generally, I would like to hand over this segment to Mrs. Siand Dhurjon. And ladies and gentlemen, this segment is just for you all across this country. It is about you, the law and you, by Mr. Siand Dhurjon. Over to you, Siand.
Thanks, Yog. Good night, everyone. About Leonard, I think Leonard could talk his way out of any trouble. I don't think there's a situation Leonard can't sweet talk and massage his way out of.
There you go, Leonard.
You guys give me a lot of kudos there, but the good counsel knows better.
When it comes to the right of liberty, that forms part of the irreducible minimum of human rights that has to be afforded to any citizen, no matter how big, how small. And that right is embodied in the Constitution at Article 139. Of course, every right is subject to qualifications. Every right has limits, and your right to freedom must be limited or can be limited if there is a reasonable suspicion that you have done something seriously wrong, something criminal. Now, the police have the power where there is a reasonable suspicion that you've committed a serious crime. In most cases, there are very serious offenses, violent offenses, certain non-violent offenses, where the police would almost invariably, almost always exercise their right to keep you in custody pending their investigations. Of course, they can go up to 72 hours. They can hold you up to 72 hours before charging you or without charging you. After that, they can apply for extensions. The Constitution says extensions. So the police have to apply to the High Court, to a judge of the High Court, to justify whether or not they can get an extension, to justify why they should get an extension. Why is it that they need more time to get their case in order? Why is it that they cannot file the charge tomorrow morning before the end of the 72 hours, let's say, and charge the person? And of course, when a person is charged, it's out of the ball is out of the police's court. It now becomes in the magistrate's court or a judge's court. And they will decide whether to grant the court bail or not, or whether, and so on. So the reason for bail is simple. It's really to preserve processes, the integrity of the investigative process, and also the integrity of the court process. So a reason, the chief reason for not granting bail would be that the person would be a flight risk. The person would get away and render the investigations or the court process, it would render it without, it wouldn't make sense to proceed without them. Courts do, however, have the power to go ex parte, which means to go on without someone being present. So a court has the power to hear a charge against a person behind their back if they have willfully absented themselves from court without explanation. And then what happens is if the court convicts them, well, then there is a warrant for their arrest and they end up being a fugitive of the state. All is well and proper if the court acquits them. So when we look at bail, when we talk about bail, there are a few things that a court looks at, or that the police look at. They look at whether or not the person is a flight risk. That's the chief reason. Whether or not the person will interfere with investigations, whether or not a person will interfere with witnesses, whether or not a person will commit further offenses if they are let go on bail. All right.
So let me just interject there. So a person is not necessarily released on bail just because of flight risk. It may be your ability to intervene and interfere with the process of the investigation itself.
Yes, and in certain charges, such as charges where you're simply charged with obstructing the course of justice, theoretically, the grant of bail should seldom or hardly be exercised unless there are special reasons to exercise it. Because here is a case where the very charge is the person obstructing the course of justice. So how is the court supposed to trust this person without serious assurances? So what courts try to do, what the police have the power to do as well, are to put conditions on a grant of bail. You can surrender your passport to satisfy the court you can't leave, or at least not leave lawfully. You can report to the station weekly, fortnightly, and so forth. Like I understand they're about to do that with Mr. Mingo tomorrow, when he has been ordered to be put on bail tomorrow in the afternoon. He will have to report himself to the station, make sure that he is there. And if he does not report to the station, well, then the police have to go looking for him again.
So Siand, one of the reasons I asked you whether a person is given that question I asked about bail and so forth. Let us just use the Mingo example. A lot of persons feel across this country that were Mingo to be released at this stage, now that a formal charge is in place and now that he's been an investigation is in place, he can then go back to confuse or interfere with material, with matters that might be material to the investigation itself. Remember those missing poll books, and remember this man was an integral part of the elections. So even if he's released, then would the court expect his employers to kind of curtail his access to matters that might be in the investigation?
Well, I have no idea what GCOM will do, but I am sure that exactly what you just said is why they couldn't just invite Mr. Mingo to come into the police station. They wanted to go there and take him without him having a chance to dissipate certain evidence and to interfere with the investigation. You see? The problem with the whole Mingo affair is that the court is really constrained by the law. You see, it's sad to say, but take, for example, certain offenses, it's very difficult to get bail for them. Narcotics offenses, firearm offenses. Under the Narcotics and Firearms Acts, there are corresponding provisions that say bail should not be granted unless there are special circumstances. And special circumstances in law is a term of art. It has its own meaning. What can be considered as a special circumstance? So you can't say, oh, because this man has 4 children, for example, he mustn't be granted. That is not special to the facts of the situation. So it's sad to say, but it's easier to get bail if you stole an election than to get bail if you had 100 grams of narcotic or of cannabis. And I remember the Attorney General saying, I was very glad to hear when the Attorney General said that on his immediate agenda, one of the things would be the passing of bail legislation, a bail act. We never had a bail act in this country. The laws and procedures relating to bail are what you call common law. They're case law based and so on. So we have to look at English cases and our cases to see what should be considered, what should not be considered for bail. But when we bring a bail law into place, then it will be laid out our own Guyanese take on what should be granted, what should not be granted, and so forth.
Right. Interesting, Leonard.
Yes, I wanted to ask because
Leonard, sorry.
uh,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Yog.
Well, Leonard, I was going to ask you from an investigative journalism perspective. When a public figure now, let us just take in consideration that a Mingo is also a public figure, a person that is seen and known in public. Whether from a news person perspective, when you're investigating a Mingo being on bail tomorrow, for example, you would more be concerned as to the security of the documents or security of things that he might have access to, and whether you would now, the same question, whether you would now be interested in asking GCOM what are they going to do about this person being released on bail? Does he still have access because he's still in the employment?
It's an interesting question, Yog, and I think we would have had Commissioner Bibi Shadik a couple of nights back, and that was one of the concerns that was raised about these people there. In fact, she did say when GCOM has its first meeting, when it reconvenes, this would be an item on the agenda with regards to the future of a couple of persons there. One would, of course, I think the investigators, if they are looking at this particular case, which is such a big case, it has to do with 5 months in which the people were held at bay, and therefore you would want to ask the question: what kind of documents would he have access to? Could he interfere? Did he have that access at that point in time, or were those documents handed over to GCOM? I'm not sure what kind of interference. I think the concern for me, and maybe for the investigators, would be: could he disappear? Could he? Because they had a hard time in the first place, in the first instance, of serving him some documents to go to court. I think those private criminal charges. So that would be a big concern for me if you lose him. Not so much of having access. I don't think he was so much up the ladder per se. I don't think there's anything that he could be there. Maybe if you're looking at a low end field, then it's a different ball game.
Right. But Leonard, here's where it gets a little bit more quirky. And Siand, I want to just invite your comment on this. So let us take Mr. Lowenfield. Mr. Lowenfield appeared to the court a couple of weeks ago. And Leonard, correct me if I'm wrong, he appeared even before, or private criminal charges were filed before he tendered that final notice to the chairman of GCOM that caused a declaration of the results. Remember, though, sirs, that the same Lowenfield had said he does not have those documents in his possession. He said that. The country has heard that. He was still at work after private criminal charges were filed against him. How then does a country, because this is not just a matter for GCOM, it's a matter for the country, how then does the country, Siand, look at Mr. Lowenfield with private criminal charge, no detention, no nothing like that? Mr. Mingo now has basically been grabbed by the police and he's detained. It's not equal.
You're asking me or Siand? Go ahead.
I really can't say what GCOM will do, but I know what they should have done a long time ago, when just the shadow of these discrepancies and allegations came to light. In any proper society, what should have been done, the basic administrative procedure in any proper institution is you put them on administrative leave or a suspension pending the hearing and outcome of an investigation. All right?
Right.
As for the dissertation of documents, well, that just makes the police task all the more harder. Right. I remember, I didn't want to bring this up, but I remember being in Ashman's building when they had all of these documents on the ground, heaps and heaps of documents. I was an observer for the Bar Association of Guyana. And these documents were just there. people were walking on them. The seals were broken. The GCOM staff were just looking, doing all kinds of things with them willy-nilly. There were no proper procedures to ensure the integrity of these documents.
Right. And my final question would be more directed towards Leonard. Leonard, would you guys have heard anything news-wise with regards to the DCEO, Miss Myers?
No, they have
whether there's any investigation
and
directed towards her?
Yog, and those are very good questions. I think a lot of people might have wondered about this entire thing. If there is, for our understanding and from what the DPP has said, that this is a criminal investigation, that she has directed the police as to what they should do and how the direction should run. And that's our understanding of what was said based on the statement that we saw. One would therefore wonder, if there is a police investigation, why go to Mingo? But if you start with Mingo, then there's also, which we would have discussed a little earlier, the Lowenfield scenario there. Lowenfield still has access, and we are assuming, of course, that he is, with all due respect to everybody, innocent until proven guilty. But the fact is that he is the CEO and he has access to all those documents. But the police, I think, would probably have a very clear strategy in their mind how they're dealing with this investigation. And to come back, if I want to jump forward a little, about those SOPs, about he saying that it's not in his possession. Well, of course, the standard operating procedures and what those documents, Bibi Shadik made it very clear a couple nights back about what goes where. And so I'm not sure what is the police MO in terms of how they're dealing with this investigation. Right. But it confuses me there a little too. I'm a little confused.
But so Siand and Siand and then Leonard, for your comments. Now there is another dimension to this. The police force were protecting Lowenfield. So much protection that a court, a summons could not have been served unto the man. How then will the police be investigating the police? And what roles the police has played in this elections 2020? We have seen that the police were part and parcel of evicting commissioners from the building. We have seen the police being in that building and doing what they did. So then the question that the public is interested in, Siand, is, might this investigation also be where the police is being investigated? Well, at least some sections of the police force and certain policemen would be investigated as well.
It's sad what has happened. The police absolutely have a duty to ensure the integrity of justice and the court's process. You see? So the police can't be going counter to the court's process and obstructing the court process, which is the service of documents, the service of a summons, and so on. But it brings me to another point, which is the whole independence of the police service, the independence of even the state employees. You see, our Public Service Commission, our Police Service Commission, all of these things are supposed to be independent. They're supposed to employ independent people, promote independent people, reward independent people, punish partisanship, you see. With each passing government, the burden is on them to ensure that is in place.
Correct.
Hello?
So Leonard, one of the things that I think that we can follow up maybe next week, I'm hoping to get, you and I are both hoping to get one of the ministers here that can, and another government person who can talk us through some of these things. But ladies and gentlemen, and Leonard, some of the things that is at the back of my mind is that the police and their complicity in certain aspects of this elections 2020 has to be brought into focus. One must remember that it was no other than a chief immigration officer, or whatever is the designation that submitted to GCOM a list that the newspapers at a simple face value investigation showed that the list was absolutely flawed, Leonard. And so an investigation has to be done as to whether there was some kind of interference at that level. So what I'm saying, and this is beyond the elections petition, we're not talking elections petitions here at all. We're talking about the conduct of persons during these 5 months that saw a derailment of the whole process. So Leonard, that's one. And two, from a newspaper man, I would want to ask you, has the police ever conducted an investigation into the killing of that gentleman in Berbice?
We're not very sure yet, Yog. This is something that people have been asking, and of course we would have to ask the police when that opportunity arises. But to come back to that point you made a little earlier with regards to the police's role in this entire situation, I think the ball game has changed significantly now. I'd say why I say that. There was a commissioner of police that was in charge. The commissioner of police is no longer there. There is a DPP who's directing the investigation, and I think there is a very strategic way, and I think she's made it very clear as to how this investigation should proceed. So I'm not too worried, because when you do an investigation, if it's a matter of fraud, I think, and I think the good counsel and yourself would know that when you're looking at fraud, look at the procedures would be very, very important. And so they would look at who would have custody to what, and what is the duty, what is it that you were supposed to be doing, and if you did this, why did you do that? And I think those are the direction that they're going to go in. And if Mingo went in a certain direction and he did certain things that was not in keeping with the standard operating procedures, well, then he would have to answer that, and I presume those are where the charges are going to be laid. So I'm not too worried about the police role as to what would have gone in the past. However, we should get in the review which was promised by President Irfan Ali, I think those are some of the questions that needs to be answered. Who directed the police when they went in and evicted everybody from the Ashman's building? People want to know. They don't want to have a repeat of this madness.
Correct. And Siand, to you, I've noted, I don't know if you guys, gentlemen, would have had time to see and read through the statement by Alexander, Corbin, and Trotman. But Siand, my question to you is that shouldn't we as a population and interested parties be well aware that there is a significant difference between the elections petition matter and the conduct of the relevant persons over these past 5 months? Are they one and the same, or are they very separate, sir?
There's a vast divide between the holding public officials, public people accountable for their actions, and the legal aspect to it. You see, an election petition is seriously a one-track thing. It has one objective: to see whether or not there were certain irregularities in an election sufficient to cause the election to be not indicative of the will of the people. But when we speak about the way that we were treated as a people, the behavior that we were exposed to in the last 5 months, there has to be some kind of recourse for that.
Correct. And so I refer to that because I know that in Alexander Corbin et al. Statement, they're basically saying is an attempt being made here to preempt a petition and to otherwise tie up documents which are required for the hearing of a petition. And Siand must have a look at their statement because it would be instructive. Yeah, it would be good to get your opinion on it because I think they're conflating the issues.
Okay. About the policeman killing, I was glad to see just recently the DPP took the step to hold 2 officers accountable for killing someone else. Definitely we have to get involved and hold the police to stronger scrutiny.
Correct. And so, Leonard, go ahead, Leonard. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I really wanted to ask the council, and back to this elections petition. I saw some comments today that out of this, the procedures, what was filed today, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms here, but forgive me for that. But in the elections petition, the what was filed, there's no indications that the SOPs, the statement, the polls, would be playing a major role in that. Is that correct? And if so, what kind of impact likely based on the council's knowledge and maybe yourself, Yog, this is going to have on the elections petition?
I have not seen the elections petition or whatever it was that they filed today. But I am aware of everyone remarking that yes, no alternative SOPs were included to dispute what was there. So they're moving on a pure strategy of dead people and migrant voters and that kind of thing. They're moving on that pure failed strategy. Again, they're just flogging a dead horse.
Good. But here is how, in my own view, it might be relevant, Leonard. At the end of the day, an elections petition is filed to dispute something. The something in this case will be the declaration. The declaration is based on what? On the recount. The recount is based on what? On account. So whether the court will lift all the veils and go beyond and beyond might not be as important. But obviously, Siand, correct me if I'm wrong, a petition will be filed against the declaration of an election that was made on the recount data or on the results that was declared based on the recount data. And the recount data, Leonard, I think it's beyond reason anymore. The recount data, everybody has seen how closely they match with the SOPs. So yeah, I agree with you, Leonard, that maybe those SOPs may not get to see the light of day. I would want to challenge Madam Chairman, if it's the last thing you do, ma'am, release those SOPs.
But there's another elephant in the room here, Yog and council. There is an elections petition which was filed for the 2015. And so would one have to be heard before the other? What happens there?
In the proper course of things have to be heard in the order they are filed, unless something is immediately urgent and you have to bring it up right away. But this is the same subject matter coming up again.
Uh-huh.
So in the ordinary course of things, I don't know. We should hear one before the other.
So we might not have another 5 years before this one is heard.
The registry of the court can take steps to hear these petitions.
Right. So, Siand, would a matter of necessity, would a matter of critical nature of a complaint be cause for it to be pulled ahead over and above other cases that might be dated because that 2015 and the effect of it is long gone?
You mean the 2015 one would be academic and this one is not?
Yes, correct.
I don't want to speak too much on this. It kind of it coincides with something that I really shouldn't speak about too much. It concerns the functioning of the court system and so on.
Okay. Got you. No, Leonard, another dimension to this thing, and I know we have moved away from it, but of course it's politics and you get hit into the political discussion anyhow. See, and I'm sorry if we have moved away from the bailable stuff and so forth. But another dimension to it is, of course, Leonard, and this is more to you in terms of your investigative journalism side. I've seen APNU AFC, persons of APNU AFC making certain statements, which I believe is very, very dangerous. They are saying that all of a sudden, this thing is about race, Mingo, and this and that and the other. From my perspective as a Guyanese citizen, I really don't care about whose race is it. What I care about is all those who were part of this 5 months tragedy, terrorizing Guyana, should be held accountable. Are you seeing the race dimension, Leonard?
Very much so. Today I saw something and And I keep wondering, how does race get into this thing here? This is it's very, very clear. And I can't understand, and I intend to take it up in the coming weeks. In the last 5 months, the entire country was
Yeah.
held at bay. Where was the race? Where was the race in that?
Oh,
The second thing is, I saw today about, I think it's Rishi Prasad, Justice Rishi Prasad, and performing the functions of the Chief Justice. And they made that a race issue. Uh, and I don't even want to dignify or even raise this issue here. But how does it become a race issue that you have a Chief Justice who just happens to be performing the duty, who just happens to be an Indian man? I don't understand that. I mean, how does it become a race issue?
yeah.
How does
And
5 months? I don't understand.
Sian, if you could, and Sian, if you could elucidate it a little bit more, ladies and gentlemen, the president, the politicians, none of the politicians get involved directly. Sian, you could tell us a little bit about appointments. If somebody is acting a Court of Appeal judge, for example, who does it?
Well, the Judicial Services Commission, which right now is not constituted, the Attorney General indicated that he will be taking all steps necessary to try to encourage and see to the reactivation of the Judicial Services Commission. But judges are appointed by the JSC, the Judicial Services Commission. Justice Rishi Prasad right now is performing the functions of the Chief Justice because she's on leave, and there cannot be a lapse in the administration of the High Court. So his responsibility is the High Court. You understand? And Justice Rishi Prasad is an eminent judge. He has distinguished himself at every level of he made quite a name for himself when he was in the commercial court as a puisne judge a long time ago, when he would clear out the cases very quickly, and everyone was to this day people would talk about the treatment that was afforded to them, how pleased they were in those days.
Right. Thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, we will be joined very shortly by Honourable Minister Collin Croal, Minister of Housing. And this has been the segment, The Law and You. And I will give Mr. Attorney at Law, Mr. Siand Dhurjon, the final word just before we say goodbye to him for tonight. And knowing that he is going to join us next Friday for another segment of The Law and You, next Friday night, of course, at 7:30. Siand, it's been a pleasure to have you here. And over to you for the final word before the minister comes on.
Thanks, Yog. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to being here again next Friday. All I want to say is that we all stand to benefit from the strengthening of our legal institutions. Things like a bail act, things like the reactivation of the Judicial Services Commission, so we can have judges, have magistrates to dispense justice quicker, more in a fair manner. We have to see that steps are taken to enforce the law against police officers who do the wrong things. I wanted to mention that. We brought it up right on this show. But yes, we all stand to benefit from the strengthening of our legal institutions. And let's continue to see what happens. Thank you, Yo.
Great. Siand, thank you so very much. And it's been a pleasure to have you here in room 592. And we look forward to your company again a week from today, same time, same place. For The Law and You. Ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, we say thanks to Mrs. Attorney at Law, Mrs. Siand Dhurjon, for joining us here. And Siand, when you come on next Friday, I understand that you are, let's spend 5 minutes, if you don't mind, sir. You are part of a legal clinic that offers services to the people of Guyana, and we want to spend 5 minutes talking about that, if you don't mind, sir.
Oh, I am not a part of that clinic. I just was, I know earlier we were chatting today. There is a Guyana legal aid clinic, which is based at the Mirage building, and they have branches in Berbice and I think one more elsewhere. And they look at underprivileged people, and they do their cases for them, certain kinds of cases, not all cases, for a much lower fee than normal attorneys would have.
Great. So, Leonard, one of the things we can do is we can have a representative from that legal aid clinic brought in room 592, and we can have a chat so that people can know what to expect from them. And Siand, it's been a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
Do keep up the good work you are doing, and we know that you are doing good work, ladies and gentlemen. Let me again say thanks to Mr. Siand Dhurjon. Siand, our regards to your family, sir, and your wonderful little kid.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Yog. Good night, Yog. Good night, Leonard.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, and good night. Ladies and gentlemen, as we await the company of Mr. Collin Croal, Honourable Minister of Housing, let me say to you that, there you are, the minister has suddenly joined us. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just say to you all that, while we're consumed by politics, we all need to appreciate that we have an ongoing situation in the country where there is this coronavirus disease. And just before I invite the minister to talk with us about the housing ministry, let me remind you all that a very, very, very troubling report has come out from the PAHO WHO team. And that is telling us that if, as a people, we are not careful, this entire population will be at risk. Hundreds of thousands of persons. And we are only 700,000. Imagine if 400,000 of us become affected. It means everybody will be. I would like to appeal to you all. Ignore those calls to come out in all those massive gathering of people. Please be careful, ladies and gentlemen. And to the point of being careful and knowing about the tests and knowing about the numbers, Leonard, we are now 1 of every 4 persons tested is testing positive.
In August.
It is dire situation in Guyana, ladies and gentlemen. And on Monday night, we have asked the Minister of Health to join us for a half-an-hour segment to tell us about coronavirus disease in this country and what's the new measures that are being implemented to ensure that maybe, ladies and gentlemen, as a public, we should demand that there be a total lockdown, because you know what? It has to come to an end. We cannot get into a vicious circle that is not going to end. Enough of that, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just say welcome to Honourable Minister Collin Croal, Minister of Housing. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Dr. Yog. Good evening, Gildarie.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Great. And welcome to Room 592, sir. And I want to ask, we're going to start our discussion right away. You were not here with us. I know you were busy. We had an attorney at law with us for the past half an hour. We were talking about what's happening.
I was following.
And what's happening across there. And a lot of things are happening. But there is a lot of interest in your ministry, sir. And I would like to ask for your opening statement in regards to, you're a new minister. You're now Minister of Housing. You are there 2.5 to 3 weeks, sir. What has been your entry into the ministry like? What has been your experience for 2 weeks? Educate us as to some of the things you might have found when you got there.
Sure. It's actually Ministry of Housing and Water.
And water, yes.
Correct. Yeah, it's been pretty exciting since I've gotten there. There are 2 ministers in this ministry. You have a minister within, Susan Rodriguez. And as you know, if you talk about housing, it's important that you also talk about water, and they are interrelated.
Absolutely.
But since we've gotten here, though, a lot of things I've found interesting. And we remember we're in transition, so we have been going through the various information. Maybe I'll speak a little on housing, and then I'll come to water so that we can separate the issues that are coming up. In terms of housing, though, I've been overwhelmed with a lot of messages and calls in relation to aspects about house lots. And then I've seen some things in the media and so forth. But I want to start off by making it clear that for us, the mandate under the Ministry of Housing is not just about sharing out of an allocation of a lot. It's about having the complete package, or it's about having a hybrid system. You have lots, or you can have options of housing, so which we'll talk a little about just now. But one of the things that I found when we got here is that this year, interestingly, and so let me address it right away. This year, there were a number of allocations made. Letters were issued to persons, and when that is why we've stopped the system that we have now. We've put on hold. The ministry would have issued a statement last night. We've put on hold the issuance as well as collection of money and so forth. The reason being is because the ministry is currently reviewing what has been happening and to have a proper assessment as to what has taken place recently. We found, for example, I was going through the records, as recent as August 1st, you have, which you know that's interesting because that's a public holiday. And that's the day before President Irfan Ali was sworn in. You had in this ministry allocations being issued to persons for house lots. You have letters being issued just before election as part of the election gimmick of letters being given to persons, but you can't find really where are these lots because then there's no infrastructure, you can't access the facility. So what we're doing currently, we're reviewing what has been done. That is all we are doing simply. I've seen notices about taking away lots and so forth. No, that's not what we're doing. We're simply carrying out a review because in light of what the certain information that is coming to light. You have, and then when you examine the issuing, you have persons who are they were issued letters of allocations, superseding persons who were in the system waiting for years. How do you explain, for example, people like former Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu, former Minister Tabitha Haley? How do you explain persons like those where the system would show that the application went in June and then they were issued lots in the following month? So it is about reviewing all of these things that have been happening to ensure that we have a fair and transparent system in the issuance of lots. That's all we're going through now, because we believe that what you had just before election is that persons were duped in a lot, giving them letters so that, as part of the election gimmick, that they can gain votes. Well, of course, it didn't work. And so that is what's happening that's some of the things that we found.
So, Minister, that is very interesting. And ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that Minister Collin Croal has been extremely friendly to the public. In fact, he is. I know I have sent to him because people normally would communicate with me. They have problems here and there. And Minister has never turned down a message. And I could appreciate where he's coming from, because both Leonard and I have received complaints about persons and their applications for lots, and they're receiving purported letters that were fake and letters that were false. And, so I could imagine, Minister, that all of these things that is on your table, you have to really check through things with a fine-tooth comb. You have to go through it before you have to verify everything before you can say so. Because the next thing you know, if you do give an approval for something, it might be something that was a setup for you. So we appreciate where you're coming from. But interesting, I must take you back to that point that you made. I see Leonard is biting at the bits there too. Mr. Moses Nagamutu is part of a list that would have applied for a house lot.
Yes.
I find that. And your ministry gives house lots based on you're not owning a house lot, right?
Well, there are a number of criteria, and that is part of the review we are going through too. So that when we're finished with this current exercise, when we reissue our policy for the allocations for house lots, is that you must be able to have a fair, transparent process and to recognize the persons who have been waiting long in the queue. So for us, we have a fundamental problem that you have jumping up the queue and you have thousands of persons who are waiting. In the system now, Dr. Yog, there are 68, the system will show that there are 68 active applicants awaiting the issuance of house lots. This year alone, they
68,000, you mean? 68,000?
Pardon me?
68,000?
68,000.
Yes, okay.
Yes. And for this year alone, they issued over 2,000 of those letters for persons in various areas. And so that is what we're doing. We're simply reviewing what took place so that we can have a policy directive and to move forward. But I want to make it clear, I want to shift the discussion a little though.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only for us, there are a number of things that we are working on. Because it's not only, our focus will not only be about the issuance of lots. And of course, our government is committed that we will issue a minimum of 50,000 over this current period, 5 years, which gives you an average of 10,000 lots. And we will achieve that. In fact, we're currently working out the various areas for which we have to prioritize to have our infrastructure done so that we can provide facilities that persons can immediately construct for themselves too. So I started off earlier by making the point. It is also about ensuring that you have the roads, the bridges, the water, and electricity to encourage persons when we allocate that you get an area and you start your construction. That is our focus. But in addition to issuance of lots, there are other things that we are going to be focusing on. Of course, we're going to cater for, or you have semi-professionals, you have professionals. So construction of homes will also be part of our focus. We have many models that we're going to be applying. Of course, you have public-private partnership. You have private sector loan, and you have through capital, raising of capital. The president, I think only yesterday would have spoken about it. And so various models that we'll be working with to be able to address for all level of income, all level of society at the same time. Next week, we will be meeting with the Banking Association so that we can discuss lending rates and things like that, of course, and the discussion will move forward in terms of incentives to encourage persons so that they can have that opportunity for themselves and their family to own their own homes. So construction of homes obviously will have government housing projects. You will have private developers. You will also have the private sector driven, and as I mentioned, through capital markets. So it's a hybrid. So that is why it's an exciting period ahead for us. And at the moment, we are also concentrating on land acquisition. We are meeting with NISIL. You know, a lot of lands are under NISIL.
Right.
We have a cross-sector meeting next week with NISIL, Guyana Lands and Survey Commission, and Gaisuco, because there are lands in various areas that falls under different ownership. For example, in the news you've seen squatting among many places, but you know recently the popular one was at South Success. When I visited and then when we looked at the map, we realized that the land is under the purview of NISIL and they are addressing that. So we want, as far as practical, to be able to acquire as much land. Why we have to work with these other agencies? Because remember, of our government intention to also reopen many of the sugar estates. So we will have to have collaboration to identify some of those lands that are intended to be put back into the system. So that is where we are.
So two things for you. Yeah, go on.
You asked also earlier about some of the things that we found. In the system here, it will show that land has been acquired. But in some of those very areas that for which they issued letters this year, the ownership is not even on the Ministry of Housing and Water. So we still have to sit with those agencies to work out how we can acquire some of those lands. Some of those lands have not been properly handed over to the Ministry or Central Housing and Planning Authority. That is
So they basically gave away land they didn't have.
Correct. So that is part of the challenge that we will have. At the ministry level focus too, of course, you have the aspect about zoning. With the Georgetown expected obviously to expand further with the advent of the oil and gas sector as well as our improvement in our economy. So we will have to work. We will be working in collaboration with the other ministries to ensure that we have the areas that are properly identified for housing development, for commercial development, because the time will come, the time will come when we also have to look beyond Georgetown because with the expansion of Georgetown, of relocating persons along for example, the Suicide Highway and so forth. So those are part of the long-term vision and plan of the ministry to implement. At the ministry level, we are also looking at the approval system, to improve the efficiency in permissions, granting of permits. We have in the queue at the central housing level, as you're aware, we've very shortly, a new board will be reinstituted. There have always been complaints about transparency in the issuing of permits, and then the length of time that request for permissions takes at the central housing level. So we're currently reviewing the review time, to looking at the legislations, looking at to see how we can improve, because it's not only about when you send your application, we also have to work with the local authorities. We also have to work with for example, for the fire department, because there are different aspects for which you must have permits. And sometimes you send those documents, you may ask them for the no objection, and the relevant sub-agencies, they take forever to respond. At the end of the day, investor come here, or someone wants to build, and they're waiting long in the queue to have that permission. So that is something we're working on to improve on, and that the Central Housing and Planning Authority Board must work in a much more professional and efficient manner. So basically, it's a single window system we're looking to improve. And those are some of the aspects that we're working on at the ministry level.
Great.
At the water sector, I've noticed like I've become my social media has become like a complaints authority, and it shouldn't be, because sometimes I get persons would send their query I forward it to the relevant officer, and believe me, simple aspects about leakage, they fix it the same day. So it means something is not working there. That if I can send a complaint on a leakage, and somebody says they've been reporting this for 3 weeks, and yet the relevant sub-region office doesn't get it fixed. It shouldn't have to come through myself. Very shortly, we'll be having a new CEO for Guyana Water Inc., as well as a newly reconstituted board for the Guyana Water Inc., and most likely in the new week. And so those are some of the things we'll be focusing over there. One of the review that I found is that the staff of GWI within the last period increased from 600 to 1,300. But when persons on the payroll, but when you examine some of the issues and some of the complaints, we don't see the matching improvement. And so that is something the new CEO will have to focus on. Of course, for us, remember
do you have a CEO as yet? Do you have a CEO?
Very shortly, one will be announced. Very shortly.
Okay.
Delivery of safe water. Remember, it's part of our mandate as in the Ministry of Housing and Water, and we're also working to reduce the non-revenue water. There are a lot of leakages. There are a lot of non-paying revenue water. So that is some of the things we have to work on to improve. As part with the budget shortly, the emergency budget, you should hear some measures in terms of our commitment that we made to our people, for our pensioners, especially in terms of looking at subsidy for our pension. There are over 25,000 pensioners in the water database. That is both on a meter and unmetered level. We're currently examining to keep our commitment of making remove the VAT on water. There was a temporary removal at GWI, and that was part of the COVID measure. But we're looking to implement that on a full-time permanent basis as part of our manifesto commitment. So there's a lot of things that are happening at the ministry level for those two sectors. When you talk about...
well, thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Go on.
Yeah, but when you talk
I just wanted to ask you some questions. I just wanted to ask you some questions on some of the things, if you don't mind, Minister, before we go on.
Sure, yes, and then I'll know how to respond.
Let me say this, that interactions that yours truly may have had over a number of years with staff at GWI, I must say that a lot of the middle managers, I have not dealt with the CEO and at that level. Very, very pleasant, very nice people there. I must say, there are some good people there. But you have had the distinction of firing two CEOs within 2 weeks. One from the water, one from water, and one from housing. So, how have you found that experience to be? Was it something that you felt had to be done? Was it because of political appointment? Was it because of you felt that their duties was not being served?
Sure. Yes. Well. In the case of Guyana Water Inc., Dr. Van West Charles, it needs no introduction in terms of his political appointment. And that needs no explanation. We are clear in terms of we're starting fresh, and part of, as I've said to the media, we are looking to ensure that we have persons in place in the leadership level to carry out our vision or mandate. And the same goes for Central Housing and Planning Authority.
So, Minister, a couple of questions for you on some of the things you said, if you don't mind. For clarification, we need to ask. Now, there are persons that would have been applying since, let us say, 2011. Now that you are there, I'm sorry to put this at you now, what might be a status of an applicant dating 2011 versus all the applications that would have come on 2018, 2017, and so forth? Would that 2011 person think that, or should he or she think that my application is gone, dead, thrown away, I need to reapply?
No. That is why, when I mentioned earlier as part of our review, we want to ensure that we clear the arrears as a priority. So those persons who are in the system, including new applicants, all will be dealt eventually. Of course, we are through our system that we're applying, and all. So I want to assure everyone, it doesn't matter if you were there in 2010, if you were in 2011, or even applied in 2019. When the relevant years are being looked at, yes, you will be addressed. No one will be removed from the system.
Great. So recently you have been, well, not recently, you have been you have come under some flack yesterday from no other than, I think, Aubrey Norton, who made certain statements, which I don't know if you would have had the time to see. But I'm reminded of it by one of our viewers, Judy Bentley Brown, who has said that while she understands that you have to look at things, whether there's fraud, whether there fraudulent documents and all of that, but she says she has a problem with your ministry returning monies to applicants because they are innocent applicants. They're innocent of any. You're not returning money?
No, we haven't returned any money. All we're doing currently is reviewing what has been taking place.
Oh, okay. So how did that get to be the news then? That somehow or the other you guys have said we are going to return everybody's money and all of that.
I think that may have been a conversation that took place in somewhere in West Coast, Berbice, but it's not. The ministry, let me clarify this. The ministry intention is not to be targeting anyone. All we're doing currently is to ensure that a free, a fair, a transparent process is applied. And in order for us to properly put things into perspective, we must conduct that review that is ongoing currently. And
right.
We have been at, and I want to put some of the staff on the front burner here too. We have been, for us as new ministers in the ministry, we have been placed at a disadvantage too, because sometimes I find the information that are being provided by the staff is not necessarily forthcoming on the first instance. You have to keep digging, and then you keep getting in further information. And so sometimes you make an informed position, and then when you get additional information, then you realize there's much more to it. And so all we're doing now is reviewing all the what's happening in the system.
Understood. And that will take some time because you have to do a thorough investigation. Minister, on your CEO...
But we're moving quickly.
Good. On your CEO for both GWI and CHPA, will you be inviting applications from qualified persons, or will the government be making a political appointment? And in both cases.
There are a number of persons who are on the table before us, and that review process is currently taking place.
Okay.
But we're
Now,
much more advanced. We're much more advanced in naming persons for the respective position.
right. Because what I found from my own perspective, there are persons in this country that might not necessarily be in the radar of the Honourable Minister of Housing or on the radar of the President or Vice President or one of the politicians, but we might be qualified and we can probably would love to have an opportunity to get ourselves into a job, be it GWI, be it whatever it is.
Yeah, but remember, But remember, there are
Go ahead.
technical positions too outside of being outside of the CEO. There are other technical positions within the two agencies, for which technical persons have an opportunity should vacancy arise.
Great. Now, Minister, with regards to you mentioned earlier that you would be looking, and your ministry will be looking at regularizing some areas. Now, question on regularizing, if that will be something that you will do, where people are squatting, will of course be, and I'm saying this to your credit, sir, I feel for you and I feel for the ministry, because squatting has taken place on some really bad places. For example, sidelines, where you need access to clean well, yes, you and others would need access to clean the drainages and clean the canals. And when squatting takes place on top of the dams, then you cannot get to clean. So that's one that I would ask your comment on. And two, sir, you said that that you'll be giving private house lots and also be looking at developers. What will your ministry do for those developers that your previous PPP government gave huge plots of land to develop, but have not done anything with the land?
Commercial lands, because those fall under commercial lands, the allocations that have been done under the commercial land are also under review. It's not only the residential lots. For this year, there were some commercial plots that have been allocated. So those are also under review. All are under review. But I want to, I want to expand a little though in terms of the public-private partnership in terms of development outside of the allocation of lots. Very shortly, you will see an advertisement for going to the media for an expression of interest for public-private partnership for construction of housing units in various areas of the Region 4 and including West Bank, Demerara. So we'll be sending out expression of interest so persons can apply, and so that in the new week you will see that in the media. So we're moving. That's why I said we're moving pretty quickly on all fronts. There's a lot.
And I must say this to you. Sorry to interject, Minister, but I must say this to you. I feel a little bit pressured to ask you some of these questions, knowing you're only in office 2.5 to 3 weeks. But you know how it goes. You have no honeymoon period, right? You have to take it as it comes. So,
but I wanted to address the squatting before you move on.
Go on. Yes.
Squatting, is an old problem. And in fact, we at the ministry, there's a department for squatting regularization. And it's even compounded further whenever you have a change in government. There's always a trend that shows that persons feel that they can start, occupying empty land or unavailable lands, and then you have to go move them. So every week since we're here, I've had to send team out to based on reports received of new squatting, and then they have to issue letters. But I want to make this statement very clear. No new squatting will be allowed or entertained. The aggressive drive that the PPPC government has for the housing sector will allow everyone an opportunity at the appropriate time, because we understand the challenge that is out there. We know that the demand is huge, but we're working to ensure that we remove the arrears and then, of course, bring it on par. And so that is why I want to repeat again, we're not going to encourage squatting, and we're going to have an aggressive drive against any new squatting. But it's a challenge. You talk about along the areas that of the reserve, the water that you're drinking in Georgetown. There are persons who are squatting right at the back of the conservancy. Well, you call it the Blacker. I visited that area too. We are looking to address that in the not too distant future when we're looking at the allocation. But you need that area to be clear. That's the water that's coming through to be, of course, treated before it gets to your household. So that is part of the challenge we're faced with in terms of squatting. But we always have our eyes open.
And I could imagine your great concern, as anybody in your capacity would be, access, right? Because when people squat on these strips and squat on these things, then access to, I mean, if something goes wrong, if you need to dredge, if you need to do anything to these outlets and so forth, then
and
access
pollution
becomes
too,
impossible. And pollution, of course. Minister, if you don't mind, I want to come back to commercial plots of land, because there's been a lot said pre-2015 elections about the PPP government handing off huge plots of lands to private developers who, I'm just reading aloud, some people say that would have been used and the developers creamed a lot of money up and some developers washed money up and but generally what they're saying is that a lot of people who were friends to the last PPP government got plots of land along the Diamond area, acres of land, and have not developed it. Is Minister Collin Croal under this PPPC government, will your approach be differently so that friends and families are not going to be afforded what might have been perceived to have been afforded in the past?
Whatever policy, the Collin Croal policy will be the policy of the PPPC government. So it won't be a separate policy of our government. But for those commercial area lots that have been given and for which nothing has been done, we have a team that will be going out to address that. So if you're talking about those that are already given, but as I said, the system will be fair, it will be transparent, and that is why I mentioned just now that we will, for those allocations, we will have expression of interest so that every developer will have that opportunity to apply and put their self in the system. And once they propose, when we're ready to deal with proposals, once it satisfies the criteria, it doesn't matter who you're a friend with, you will benefit accordingly.
And
so I don't need to become your friend to get land. And let me hand you over to Mr. Leonard Gildarie for his question.
Yeah, thank you very much, and friends and family.
Leonard,
housing. Yeah, you know.
Don't take yourself a friend to the minister. You're gonna get the land.
No. I'm here as a media man. I'm very careful. I got to be very careful in what I'm doing. But leading up to from 2011 and so on, I covered housing, so it's a very big pet subject of mine. I used to interview the now president, Dr. Finale, a lot, and in fact we had a lot of clashes back and forth over it. But that being said, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you. So somebody's asking if you're living overseas. I know there was a remigrant scheme that they would have had. How easy it is, or how possible is it for somebody to apply for that? First question.
Yeah, well, in terms of, as I said, we're catering for everyone, and even that's why I mentioned about the professional and semi-professional housing as a category. Of course, there will be an area allocated for that. But there will be minimum. We haven't set out the policy. There is a policy in place before, but even to review what is there, we haven't finally discussed that as to how we'll go about dealing with in terms of the migrant. But that is something we will also cater for migrants.
Yes,
it's been done before, so it's nothing new.
Right. I know. I think that's in the Providence area.
Yeah, but Leonard, we also want to encourage, because we want to encourage others to return. We want to encourage persons to come back to serve their country. That is why I also spoke about, in addition to those who are here, we also have to look at incentives so that you can encourage persons to come back and, reinvest back into their country. Because when you remigrate, you bring a lot of resources too. And so the country benefits. It's a win-win situation for the country.
A little earlier, Minister, you would have spoken about, I think, former Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu and Tabitha Haley. I'm curious, a little follow-up, because where are these lands located? Because we were told that they're not any lands located. Very quickly, could you give us a little up-to-date? Where are these lands?
Their application, they would have, for their allocation would have been somewhere on the East Bank.
That's interesting.
Among me, I only mentioned those two. There are others. There's a long list of persons, but I've only mentioned those two as examples.
And there is a big problem. I'm not seeing a lot of people talking about it, but along these bank there between Farm to Diamond Grove area there's over 35,000 Venezuelans in Guyana, and there's thousands, I understand, that is located between Farm to Grove. How has the Ministry of Housing and Water started to maybe contemplate or started looking at the possibility of how do they handle the influx of maybe the Venezuelans and the Cubans and all the others that are here? Because sometime or the other... Go ahead.
We have started to address our mind to those category of persons. Not in Region 4, outside of Region 4, we've started to address our mind in terms of land. But outside of Region 4.
And of course, the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of accusations against staffers within the ministry. How does the Collin Croal or the PPP government intend to deal with this problem that seems to be dogging the ministry for a very long time?
Well, once you have information that we'll certainly investigate and follow up. Only yesterday, someone provided me a tip, but I couldn't advance the investigation because I needed something a little more tangible to work on. But I have that information, and as I can work my way through, then I'd certainly follow up on it. But yes, first of all, we have at the ministry level, we'll be having an open door policy, notwithstanding the COVID regulation, and that is why we're restarting the open day just after our the debates on the budget. That'll be presented very shortly, and so sometimes the budget debates, they run for 2 weeks. But just after that, the ministry will commence its open day on Tuesdays, and that is one. So you'll do it through appointments because we need to practice the restriction in terms of the COVID regulations. But we'll advertise very shortly how we go about doing that. So I want to encourage persons there. And if you have information, please feel free to send it to the minister's office. We'll certainly investigate it. But yes, I have heard rumors in terms of within the ministry.
Yes. And of course, Minister, Guyana is not about Demerara alone. And what would you say to the people up in Berbice and in Essequibo as well, and maybe Linden and the other areas?
Yes, we're examining land for every region. It's not a region. The ministry policy is not a region 4 or coastland basis. It's for all regions. We're examining to find land so that we can make available. So I want to be assure the nation on that.
Yes, and Yogan, just observation here. While I was doing a lot of work with housing, I found that the point was made by the now president here, finally, about the spin-offs, because you had banks, transportation industry, lawyers, you have the what you call the contractors. There's so many things, so many spin-offs that were happening because of the housing industry. And I'm sure that somewhere along the line, I would like to see it start back. There was even the housing expo. I hope that's something that you think back to do, because it was such an interesting thing where they bring together all the
There will be
hardware stores and so on. And it was interesting seeing the products that they had there. I would love to see that sometime or the other.
there will be a building expo next year.
Very good. I like that.
The launching for that will be sometime in another month and a half. There'll be a launching for the Building Expo to be held next year.
Very good. Yog?
Great.
Of course, the focus will not be narrowed on just housing. It's going to be huge.
Correct.
Our president is charged us as ministers, to ensure that we think big. We think about the long-term development of our country, and it's the same thing we're doing in terms of the housing sector, to ensure that when we're thinking about the housing drive, to look at the long-term solutions for Guyana.
Yes.
Right. Now, Minister, you have stepped into the shoes of no other than a man who's now the president of the country. And when he was the Minister of Housing and Water, he had also held out a portfolio. But that aside, he had created quite some strides. He was very energetic. He had created quite some impressive strides in housing and done quite a lot of things. How do you feel stepping into his shoes, sir?
Will be a huge you'll be a huge shoe to follow. But for me, a lot of persons have asked me this. I'll be honest with you here. And for me, I see this as an advantage that my president sat here as the Minister of Housing and Water. So it means that therefore that we can, the drive for this sector, I have a great motivator, no doubt, no less than the president. And so I see it as an advantage.
Right. Now, I want to get back to, I'm actually receiving some messages. So I want to ask you back a question in relating to private developers, because a person has sent an inbox message, Minister. Is it your policy that when persons submit an interest in doing development, are you keen on a holistic approach? In other words, what's your take on the presentation of a plan? Are you keen on them ensuring drainage, electricity, water, and everything else? Or will your ministry be meeting them halfway? And this person is extremely keen on what's your thinking about drainage as an important part of any housing development.
Drainage and road will be part of the infrastructure development for the housing development. So in terms of the house lots, in terms of developers, it has when you're going to present a proposal, the proposal must, of course, also fit into our direction in which we're moving our country toward. And so there are a lot of factors that will go into place when you're evaluating a proposal submitted. And that,
right.
But what has happened too, what we're reviewing currently, because there's always been a close relationship, in our previous government time, a close relationship in terms with Go Invest and the Ministry of Housing and Water. And so we are currently reviewing how we'll go about doing that. And that is why I mentioned earlier about the single review system to improve efficiency. Because time is of essence, and money too. And so we want to reduce the waiting period for when you make your submissions. Once it's valid, that it be dealt with in a timely manner.
Beautiful. So you are keen on ensuring infrastructure and so forth, everybody fits into the puzzle.
Correct.
Before you think. Sir, my last question to you. Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Irfan Ali, now president, he also had developed an extremely good initiative of inviting the local commercial banks to come on board and to work with applicants for housing. Will that also be something that you and your current government will also be keen on doing?
Yes. That is why I've mentioned we're meeting the Banking Association.
Yes.
But even before that invitation, we're meeting next week. The New Building Society, very early when took up this office, reached out and indicated that they're ready to and willing to work on improving collaboration. And of course, we have to look at the interest rates and the lending rate.
Of
Certainly,
course.
the banking sector will play an important role.
Great. Well, Minister, it's been a pleasure to have you here, and our hour has run out so very quickly. We do know, and I ask you to be patient with us, we do know that your ministry, fortunately, I believe, because you are a people's person and you don't mind interacting, but your ministry attracts so many questions and so many queries from members of the public. Minister, may I ask that, in a couple of weeks' time, please return. And when you return, we're probably going to have a little bit more of an open format where we'll be reading out to you some of the, and maybe invite both you and, if possible, your fellow minister to also join us at any time, because people would love to have a further conversation with you, especially as your plans are unfolding, given that the emergency budget should be released sooner rather than later, sir. Your final thoughts, sir, as we bring our program to its closure.
Yeah, thank you. I must thank you for inviting me here tonight, and it will be a pleasure to be back at your convenience. I'm always happy to share what we plan for our nation. The housing sector will be one of the drivers of the economy under PBPC government. There are a lot of, the time doesn't permit us to go into the spin-off that we expect from the housing drive. But that is something you can be rest assured that will play an important role. And so I want to close out therefore by saying that we are working as a team to ensure that we deliver to the needs of our people. We understand the demand. We understand the challenges out there. Sometimes, the amount of messages I receive, I just can't respond to all of them. And when you read some of them, you understand the plight that are faced by men, confronting people and the need demand. And so there are a lot of things that can be done. And you really want it to be done as quickly as possible. Of course, resources has to play a role. So we will continue to respond, and we'll continue to work together to ensure that right across our country that we have development for housing and for the more safe water for our citizens, for everyone.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Minister. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And I must say to you, sir, after 3 weeks, good job. You're really doing well. And on behalf of our viewers and listeners, keep up the good work. And that message is for you both, you and your fellow minister within the ministry, and as well as the staff who are dedicated to serving the people of Guyana. We know you are going to make us proud, sir. Do keep up the good job, and we look forward to continuing engagement with you.
Thank you very much.
So do have a great night, Minister, and our regards to the family as well, sir.
Thank you, I will. And to our viewers, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you very much, sir.
Great. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you all join us here in room 592, where we unleash the truth. And tonight we've been privileged to have the Honourable Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Collin Croal, tell us about what he has found there in the ministry after having, they hit the ground running basically, and what are some of his immediate plans. Interestingly, we spoke about quite a few things, Leonard. We spoke about migrants. We spoke about the housing problems in Guyana. He revealed 68,000 applicants are in the system. He also revealed that surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the politicians of the previous government, including the Prime Minister, would have made applications and received lands very, very quickly. We also spoke about development, private developers, interaction with the banks and other agencies. Leonard, it was quite a good discussion, wasn't it?
I like that. And, young minister, very forthright. And I like this kind of conversation that we're having with our people in power. We should not be scared to say, to call a spade, and say what the situation is. If we don't have money or we're facing challenges, let's don't beat around the bush. Let's say it. I kind of like the conversation where it has been headed over the last couple of weeks, talking to several ministers. Of course, I didn't like the fact that you asked him to compare his foot size to the good president, Dr. Irfan Ali. But that's okay. I know that you were kidding there, and so I will have to protect my minister as well. But it is a good thing to hear some of the reality. But 68,000, I think there's going to be a tall order to really fill in terms of finding the lands. Maybe, I think a couple of years back, the Ministry of Housing was looking along the highway, maybe something called Silica City there. That's where they wanted to go. So it's going to be interesting to see how they find the lands and then open up those
I thought
lands.
you were talking about a hideout. You said highway, not hideout, right?
You're
Not
talking
really
about the
hideout,
Umbrella Resort?
highway.
Is that what you're saying? I don't know, man.
Well, Leonard, it's been a pleasure to be here with you tonight, my friend. Always a pleasure to share the platform with you here. I know it's a Friday evening, and so our viewers and listeners would want to also have some time with their family. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from, it's been a pleasure to have you here in room 592, where we unleash the truth. Let me just say this to you. We look forward to having a discussion with you all in the presence of, look forward to having a discussion with Minister Frank Anthony in front of you all on Monday night, as we have an update on COVID-19. And we're also hoping to have the company of one other minister with us on the same night. We will reveal to you over this weekend who the minister will be. As the discussion continues, ladies and gentlemen, remember it is weekend. Be safe, stay away from others, and please keep yourself and family COVID-free. Ladies and gentlemen, as I say every time we have room 592, say a prayer for this country of ours. It is still the best place on earth. Say a prayer for our countrymen. It is unity that will make us all achieve great things. May God bless this beautiful country of ours. May God bless each and every one of you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
COVID-19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.
Kite Radio.
Covering Guyana from coast to coast.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kite Radio.